The morning light filtered through reinforced crystal glass, muted and cold. No sun touched the walls of the suite within Grey Keep, only the pale hum of magical warding, woven through stone and silence alike. The room was secure but not comfortable, safe but not welcoming. Saladin College sat cross-legged near the far wall, his maul leaning against the bed frame, his fingers curled around the small wooden bear that rarely left his palm. Theodor paced restlessly, muttering to himself in spirals of thought too jagged to share. Theodor eventually moved to stand near the window. The door unlocked with a hiss. In stepped Harwin Drelmont, swordsmaster of the Paladins. He looked worn, not in the battlefield sense, but the quiet fatigue of someone who'd spent the entire night navigating a city full of fire, gunshots, angry letters, and worse opinions. "I'm not here to arrest you," he said, breaking the silence with a tired smile, "though a few people think I should." Saladin rose slowly, rolling his shoulders. "We didn't start the fire," he said, voice low and even. "No," Harwin replied, "but you didn't stop it either." He limped further into the room, a light brace on one leg, and scanned each of them in turn. "Let's not pretend you haven't done good, you have. But so have plenty of unstable mages and well-meaning lunatics. The problem isn't your intent, it's your unpredictability." Theodor tilted his head. "We're also still alive, and so are a lot of people who wouldn't be without us." "That's why you're not in a cell," Harwin said, tone sharpening. "And because I went to war for your freedom, but that freedom has terms." He turned toward the door and nodded once. A dwarven figure stepped inside, short, broad, and armored in the austere silver-etched style of the Order of the Iron Soul. His beard was tightly braided, his expression tight with focus. "This is Hendrik," Harwin said, "Paladin of the Order, newly knighted. He'll be accompanying you as your escort, not a warden, but a witness. If you are who you say you are, this shouldn't be a problem." Hendrik stepped forward, voice firm and composed. "I'll not interfere with your duty, but I will report if that duty becomes dangerous to others." Theodor leaned to Saladin and muttered under his breath, "He looks like someone who calls warm ale a sin." Judge Saladin gave the faintest grunt of amusement. Before any further commentary could spiral, the door opened again, this time without invitation. Sylvara Brightscale stepped in, shining like the edge of a blade. Her silver scales caught what little light the room offered. Eyes like glacial steel swept across the room and landed squarely on Saladin. "You're fighting tonight," she said, her voice cool but resonant. "I'll be watching." She moved beside Hendrik, her mere presence settling the room. "You've caused more damage in the last week than some warbands do in a season. I'm not here to argue the justice of it. I'm here to make sure the Order sees everything it needs to see." Harwin inclined his head to her. "She'll be in the stands, watching, judging." Sylvara's gaze lingered on Theodor a moment longer than necessary. Then she turned away. "Your equipment has been returned," Harwin continued. "Most of it. Some pieces are still under review, pending arcane clearance." No one objected. He stepped to the exit and placed his palm against the sigil plate. The lock runes glowed, then dissolved in silence. The doors opened fully. "You're not prisoners anymore," he said. "But you're not untouchable either. Don't give anyone a reason to make this harder than it already is." Saladin tucked the bear into his belt and walked through the door. The others followed. Behind them, Sylvara's voice called one last word of caution. "Don't prove me wrong." Zethian moved like wind shadow through the city's edge, where Titan's noise dulled to a hum, and the morning sun hadn't yet melted the rooftop frost. He scaled a low wall, dropped into an alley, and passed beneath a carved lintel where a sign hung on simple rope. An arrowhead wreathed in ivy. It swung gently, despite the still air. This was the Hollow Rest, an inn without guests, a hall without a name to most. For those of the Conclave, it was a waypoint, a place to lay low, rearm, or receive orders away from Titan's endless scrutiny. Inside, the scent of pine and old parchment filled the quiet parlor. A chalkboard listed no prices. A charm in the rafters whispered forest sounds, more illusion than comfort. At the front desk stood Velen Merkthane, Warden Sergeant of the Western Reach. His frost-white hair was bound in a low tail, and a claw-like scar traced his jaw. His coat bore the ivy crest and command markings of someone who had survived too many missions by knowing when not to speak. "Zethian," he said without a hint of greeting. "You're late." "Still arrived," Zethian replied with a thin smile. Velen slid a pouch across the desk. The clink of coin inside spoke of upfront wealth, not a reward earned. "Half of what was promised," Velen said. "The job's not done yet." Zethian opened the pouch, checked the weight. From the Darrows? Velen nodded once. Victor and Eliza. They hired us a month ago. Quiet contract, no paper trail. They wanted someone watching from a distance. You were our best asset for a job that needed eyes, not questions. Zethian narrowed his gaze. And now, they've vanished. 2 weeks ago, Velen confirmed. Left their estate without fanfare, said it was a coastal inspection trip. Supposed to return in 4 days, they never did. Zethian's brow furrowed. And the client? You're the client now. Finish what you started. We want to know where they went, and if they're still breathing. Velen reached under the desk and withdrew a leather-bound folio. Last known heading was southeast, into the edge of the Royal Zone. They had trade routes near Hammerfall and Seaview. It's not confirmed, but they might have crossed into the wild. Zethian flipped through the folio. Logistics routes, maps with merchant trails, a few sketched profiles. The final sheet was a likeness of Eliza Darrow. Her eyes captured in chilling detail, regal, distant, half-guarded. The woman who had once hired him to watch her own son without ever admitting why. They mentioned Theodor, Zethian asked quietly. Velen's face did not move. Only by implication, the same way nobles refer to mold on the wine casks. Zethian tucked the folio away. I'll find them. Good, Velen said. But understand something. Whatever grudge that family has with their son, it's not our concern. What matters is the contract, the disappearance, and the royal. Zethian paused halfway to the door. The Darrows may not matter to you, but he's traveling with me now. And like it or not, his shadow follows this. Velen didn't reply. He only reached beneath the desk once more and pulled free a slim glass vial with a pressed seal. Take this, he said. Royal counteragent, temporary. Might buy you 10 minutes of sanity if things turn sideways. Zethian caught it one-handed, the glass gleaming faintly in the morning light. I assume I won't see you again for a while, Velen added. If you're lucky, Zethian replied, and was gone. The bell above the door didn't chime. It sang. A perfect crystalline note, impossibly long for such a simple swing. As the door clicked shut behind them, the noise of Titan faded, and the world turned quiet. Saladin ducked his head as he entered, his shoulders brushing wind chimes made from what looked like dragon teeth and surgical tubing. The interior of Shan-Shara's Emporium of exotic goods was a contradiction in terms. Cluttered but precise, like a laboratory designed by a collector with too many hobbies and too little sense of danger. The walls were lined with glass-fronted cabinets and floating shelves, each holding everything from orreries of unknown star systems to silver-threaded boots that twitched faintly when no one looked directly at them. Arcane glyphs flickered on price tags like whispered promises. Don't touch anything that hums, Theodor said over his shoulder to Hendrik, who stood stiffly just inside the threshold, eyes wide beneath his helmet. Or anything. That's not humming, but looks like it wants to. I wasn't planning to, Hendrik muttered. This place feels like it breathes. A tall human woman appeared from behind a set of bead curtains. She wore goggles pushed up onto her forehead and an apron stained with alchemical varnish. Her sleeves were scorched at the cuffs, and her voice had the gravel of someone who had inhaled too many transmutation fumes. Shan-Shara isn't in, she said, brushing her gloves off on her hips. But the floor's open for registered patrons. No touching the vitrified stock, no unsanctioned testing, and no summoning inside the display ring. Saladin gave her a polite nod. Just need a few things. Won't be long. He moved with deliberate care through the aisles, his massive hands staying close to his belt to avoid accidental destruction. At the healing section, 3 tall shelves flanked by rune-etched mirrors, he made his picks quickly. 2 standard healing potions, 1 greater. The prices flickered briefly in the air when he touched the glyph plates, then sealed with a chiming ping. The clerk nodded from the counter. That all? Saladin glanced at Theodor, who was eyeing a rack of semi-liquid rings, then at a display case tucked beneath a rune-locked dome. Inside sat a shotgun, sleek and ominous, its matte finish inlaid with red sigils that pulsed faintly, as if syncing with some rhythm beyond hearing. A placard hovered beside it. Dead Man's Roar, Royal Forged Shotgun Cone Blast, Kinetic Push. It doesn't miss, it ends conversations. Last tested on a troll. Troll is gone. Saladin stared at it a long moment, hands curling just slightly. You can ask to test it, the clerk offered, tone casual. Just not in here. He shook his head, stepping back. Not yet. Instead, he pulled a small leather pouch from his belt, stuffed with loose jewels and the last remnants of dungeon spoils. These worth anything? These. The clerk sorted through them with practiced fingers, using a small red lens to check for enchantments or illusions. Standard cut dungeon salvage. Nothing cursed. I'll give you 300 per stone. Saladin nodded. Deal. She counted out the coin with remarkable efficiency. No scales, just flicks of the hand and flashes of sigils, and handed him a set of gleaming platinum pieces in a padded pouch. As they turned to leave, Theodor paused by the dead man's roar one more time, tapping the dome thoughtfully. You know, he said to Saladin, that thing's got your name written all over it. Or maybe somebody else's, depending on how bad your aim is. Saladin didn't answer. He just looked at the shotgun, then at his maul, and back again. Then they stepped into the daylight, and the Emporium's door whispered shut behind them, leaving the bell's perfect note hanging in memory. The Broken Keg was quieter than usual. Not quiet, never truly that, but subdued. The late afternoon sun filtered through smoke-stained windows, casting long shadows across half-empty tables. The scent of roasted meat hung in the air, but the fire seemed to crackle with less mirth than usual. Saladin, Theodor, and Hendrik stepped inside together. The barmaid gave a short wave before turning back to her work. A few patrons looked up, recognition sparking in some, unease in others, but no one said a word. At a corner booth near the rear hearth, Zethian sat alone. He didn't rise when they entered, just gestured to the seats with 2 fingers and a faint twitch of a smile. Theodor slid in first, opposite Zethian. Hot stuff, he said by way of greeting. You make brooding look like a lifestyle. Not brooding, Zethian replied, eyes never leaving his half-drained cup. Waiting. Saladin dropped onto the bench beside Theodor, resting his maul against the table with a muted thunk. Hendrik remained standing a moment longer, surveying the tavern like a guard scanning for exits, before finally sitting across from Saladin with the upright posture of a man still adjusting to casual settings. Zethian's eyes flicked toward the dwarf. You're new. Hendrik, the paladin offered. Paladin of the Iron Soul. I'll be accompanying you. Zethian raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Theodor grinned and clapped his hands together once. He's our babysitter, and before you ask, yes, he's very serious. No, he doesn't laugh at my jokes. And yes, he's still got that fresh-off-the-oath smell. I've noticed, Zethian said dryly. Saladin leaned forward slightly, voice low. You find anything? Zethian's answer was slow, careful. Something. We'll talk after the fight. That was enough, for now. A silence settled over the group. Not uncomfortable, just dense. 4 men, each carrying their own weight, their own regrets, preparing to add one more layer tonight. Darvoth wasn't behind the bar, but someone had left a covered platter waiting at their table. Roast slices of boar, thick bread, and a pitcher of watered ale. Hendrik glanced at it, unsure. It's safe, Theodor said with mock solemnity. Mostly. Zethian poured himself a drink. Hendrik followed suit with careful precision. Saladin took the last of the bread and chewed thoughtfully, his eyes on the embers in the hearth. After a time, Theodor leaned back and sighed. We should probably get moving soon. Don't want to keep the crowd waiting, especially not with Brightscale watching from the royal seats. Hendrik straightened. She's fighting before you, right? Saladin nodded. We'll follow her lead. Let's hope you don't follow her opponent's result, Theodor added, earning a soft grunt from Zethian and a slight smirk from Saladin. They finished the meal in silence, stood in tandem, and left without fanfare. Outside, the city waited, alive with noise and heat and the promise of spectacle. But beneath that, something darker coiled in the shadows of the streets, and somewhere not far from the roar of the crowd, destiny waited in the ring.